Welcome to the Cannabis Pioneers Show, and I'm excited to kick off this new interview session because the marijuana industry is experiencing a 1933 moment. The purpose of this Cannabis Pioneers Show is to bring the important talking points to the surface and make sure that any investors who want to become one of the early generation owners of this booming industry have all the latest information in their hands. Last week on the Times of Industry show, I had an intense interview with Mr. Jordan Goodman of MoneyAnswers.com. If you haven't checked it out, Jordan covered an 8% yield strategy for real estate income. He covered how to invest with minimal funds in a real estate investment trust, how to slash your 30-year mortgage into a 5 or 7-year mortgage, and also how to cut out your student debt loans substantially. Today, I welcome his brother, Washington House of Representatives member Roger Goodman. How are you, sir?
Doing great, thank you.
Roger, look, you've done so much, with the legislation and the all the aspects that have to do with the marijuana legalization. So I just like to start with a thorough update on the cannabis legalization process. Where does it stand? How high of a priority is it for Washington? Does the president get involved in this? Explain the inner workings of Washington when it pertains to the marijuana industry right now.
So Washington and Oregon were the two states that first fully legalized marijuana for general adult use, not just medical marijuana, but for what we like to say recreational. I say general adult use. And since Washington and Colorado, did I say Oregon? I'm sorry, Washington and Colorado, Oregon, now California, Nevada, Massachusetts, all the states are now starting to consider full-scale legalization. It began in 2012, and now in Washington and Colorado, we have licenses issued to businesses to grow marijuana, to process it into other products, and to sell it in retail stores just like any other commodity. It's fully regulated. And we've seen tremendous benefits in many different ways. We've seen a lot of tax revenue come into the state, almost $1 billion in the last year, and that just in Washington state alone. We've seen a lot of public safety benefits. People are not drinking as much beer. We've already seen throughout the United States about a $2 billion decrease in beer sales. And so people are buying marijuana instead and using marijuana as a substitute, which is, we've seen that in many times. Whenever marijuana becomes more available, people substitute away from alcohol, which they believe to be more harmful. And so, as a result, we've had less deaths and injuries on the roads because alcohol-related deaths and injuries are a huge problem. So we've really increased road safety. And the other very interesting thing is that young people are not increasing their use of marijuana, but either decreasing or just sort of the levels are staying the same among high school age kids, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. There's no increase in marijuana use among young people. There's almost a perception that it's not a forbidden fruit, and so there's less of a temptation for the adolescent to use it. So basically, and younger kids who really shouldn't be using it, 13, 14-year-olds, are using less. And so we have a reduced use by young people, reduced deaths on the roadways, and increased revenue. And generally, for those who wanted to use marijuana, it's a safer product because it's very heavily regulated. No pesticide use when growing it. Most of it is organic. And then the packaging and all of the labeling is very strictly regulated, as it would be for food products or any other product that humans consume. So all in all, it's been very good news.
Excellent. You know what? In terms of what you said with regards to the youth, I couldn't agree more. If something is doesn't seem like it's fascinating, it's just a regular commodity out there, then you can talk about it more. You can. It's not like you're trying to punish the children, and they don't feel the need to rebel. I also think that the jobs that are created in terms of, you talked in terms of revenues for the states, but in terms of job creation, the marijuana industry has amazing potential. Just how big are the numbers? I mean, how many people can the marijuana industry absorb and employ, especially, with jobs going away out of the United States forever? And I know just recently the Pennsylvania state auditor said that just the recreational use could replace the vanishing steel jobs in Pennsylvania. How accurate is that?
Yes, there's tremendous potential for job increases. We've already seen in Colorado and Washington, and now in Oregon, and coming up in California and Nevada and other states. Not just jobs growing marijuana and working in the retail stores or working in the processing plants and so forth, but carpenters and electricians and plumbers. You have to construct buildings to do this. Transportation, accountants, attorneys. I am an attorney. I'm a lawyer, and I'm also a member of the legislature, but it's a part-time legislature. So in the off time, I'm a practicing attorney, and my clients are marijuana businesses. So my legal business profits off the marijuana industry as well. So not just the direct employment, but the ancillary industries, website design. I mean, you name it. It's a booming new industry. There's tremendous potential for making investment in it. And I guess we'll talk about some of the risks. But yes, this is sort of the big new thing, the big new opportunity now.
Yeah, you know what? The beautiful thing about it is the demand is already out there. The product is already loved, and all we're doing is taking an illicit, fully criminalized business, and we're moving all of that revenue and all of that job, everything that it has to do, into the regular economy, and that gives the entrepreneurship spirit of things to even innovate and create new technologies, new types of products, new type of delivery systems. You can do a lot of things when everything is legit and on the table. A couple of days ago, a bill to legalize marijuana for recreational use was introduced in West Virginia, for instance. Could you describe your connection to the marijuana legalization process nationwide, and how powerful and irreversible is it at this point?
Yes, we have, as I say, we are beyond the tipping point. Several years ago, it was unthinkable that we would have marijuana stores and adults free to purchase and use marijuana without penalty. I do have to say that it's not only a benefit to the economy, the opportunity for entrepreneurs and all sorts of economic activity, but the reduced criminal system costs. We were arresting 800,000 Americans every year, about 90% of them just for mere possession of marijuana, and those arrests are declining dramatically. And we're not wasting time for police who need to be busy, protecting public safety. We're not wasting jail time and court time. So there's savings in the government as well. It's making us more efficient. But in terms of the culture change, it took some leadership. It took some courage for opinion leaders and elected officials to step out and to say, sort of expose the truth. Like, what are we talking about? This is a vegetable matter. This is a plant we're talking about. That trying to prohibit it is absurd. And when you really take a look at the so-called war on drugs, it goes back 100 years, and it doesn't have to do with the drugs themselves. It had to do with the people, the vulnerable, unpopular groups in society. So, for instance, the Mexicans bringing marijuana across the border 100 years ago, they were, discriminated against and perceived as stealing our jobs and raping our women and so forth. And so, marijuana was made illegal not for because it was a harmful drug, but because it was a tool to control an unpopular group in society. The same thing with heroin and cocaine and African Americans. It's the same thing even with methamphetamine these days with poor whites in the rural areas. So, and now actually, we're seeing now with we have a resurgence of heroin abuse. Heroin, of course, is still illegal. It's still prohibited, and yet it was a pharmaceutical. It's a pharmaceutical. It was synthesized by Bayer Pharmaceutical Company in 1898 as a cough suppressant, and it is of tremendous medical value. And heroin ought to be brought back into the pharmacopoeia, into the regulated medical market. It shouldn't be prohibited, and under medical supervision, it would be very helpful. But instead, we have this prohibited market, and it yields terrible results. We have the criminal gangs trafficking in it and violence as a result. But what is interesting is since the marijuana legalization movement has taken full flight, we are tending not to punish people for heroin abuse now. We are really looking upon it as a medical problem. And so that's actually one benefit of, in Switzerland, they bring long-term heroin addicts indoors and give them substitutes and allow them to use, and it reduces their use, and then, of course, reduces public disorder, reduces the spread of disease, and reduces public costs and so forth. We're actually going to be starting that here in Washington State, in Seattle, the first in the country to bring long-term heroin high-volume users indoors to provide them for an opportunity to gateway into treatment, but not sort of cold turkey, making them quit altogether. It's an innovative and very effective way of reducing addiction and harm. But just the general view of mind-altering substances has changed, and so it was a tough effort. I was involved in that starting 15 years ago to get the professional voices to speak out, lawyers and doctors and pharmacists and religious leaders and civic leaders to say, wait a minute, this war on drugs is insane. We're arresting people for what they're putting into their bodies. It's almost as if we would be arresting people for eating too much chocolate cake or it's consensual activity. They're not harming anyone else. And so I think the public has woken up. I also think that generational change, plenty of experience with marijuana and other substances has made people realize that this should be a regulated market. It should not be prohibited. Prohibition didn't work with alcohol in the 1920s, and prohibition hasn't worked today. And we still have a way to go. So, heroin is prohibited, cocaine is prohibited, and these prohibitions yield terrible black markets with violence attending to them. And so we still have a way to go, but marijuana is leading the way right now.
Sure. Well, you kind of touched on two of my next questions, which were, how does legalizing impact crime rates, which obviously it reduces it substantially, and it's a great plus. And on education, when you legalize it and you have so much tax revenue, you can allocate some of it to workshops for the youth and to prevent truly harmful substances from getting overdosed. I really want to touch on how bullish are you, or how positive are you on the pharmaceutical part of this legalization process? I bet pharmaceutical companies are extremely thrilled that they can explore scientifically the characteristics of hemp and marijuana and cannabis, and 100 and 200 years ago there were about 25,000 uses for hemp and marijuana, including a lot of medical substances. So are you getting approached by medical companies? Do you see them pushing for this to move forward so they can move forward and create products that elderly people would need, or people with pains, etc.?
Yes. First of all, I did want to comment on crime very briefly. The war on drugs has yielded an increase in crime by trying to prevent people from using drugs, and the different types of crimes are the mere possession of the drug, which is absurd. Most people have been arrested and prosecuted for just merely possessing the drugs. The transfer of drugs from one person to another, whether it's a sale or a gift, that's also a crime. That's also absurd. And then there are the crimes associated with the market, the violent market. And that's really what this is. It's not about drugs, it's about drug markets. And so we are now beginning to regulate rationally drug markets. And so because the markets were underground, because the products are prohibited, that means that criminal gangs get into it, and they're the sort of nastiest people on the planet. So, and then finally, are crimes, violence and harm to others, resulting from the use of the drugs themselves, the pharmacological effect of the drugs. And what do you know? It's alcohol. Alcohol, by far, is associated with criminal behavior. 50% of the rapes at least in our country, 40% of the murders and assaults are directly related to the effects of alcohol. Marijuana and the other drugs, heroin, marijuana, some actually drugs, ecstasy, for instance, MDMA, is associated with a significant reduction in criminal behavior because of an increased sense of empathy and calmness and so forth. So alcohol, if you're going to talk about a drug that causes crime, it's alcohol, the direct effects of alcohol. So just a little bit of a discussion there of crime. And so by regulating these substances, bringing them into the normal markets, we are eliminating all of these other crimes of the mere possession or the transfer or the criminal gangs dealing with them in the unregulated markets. It's alcohol that we really have to continue to control. So the other thing about education, so in our law in Washington State, we have devoted a significant portion of the revenue to education and prevention. The idea of making sure that young people in particular know that marijuana is not something to play around with. It is a psychoactive substance. It is more potent than before, and it is something that you need to wait to use until there's further brain development. Some say age 18. Our official age is age 21. I actually believe it should be age 19. I think you need to get out of high school, and then you should be allowed discretion with regard to alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, and so forth. But it is age 21, and that's just the law at the moment. We do have considerable use between age 18 and 21, so it's sort of a well-known secret. But we do need to devote some of the funds, some of the revenue to education, and we are doing that by law. So there's a lot of prevention or education work going on out there. Now, as far as the medical use, the whole plant, the cannabis plant, is almost a magical plant. It has so many benefits in terms of analgesia, pain relief, blood pressure effects. It reduces particularly gastrointestinal distress. It is a part of wellness if used in small amounts, as part of one's living regimen. And so here's the difficulty: if you take the plant apart and try to isolate some of the constituent elements, the active ingredients, it can have indeed some medical benefits. And so the pharmaceutical industry, I'm sure, is interested in this, and yet it really is the whole plant that yields the most medical benefits. And this is what the research has shown. This is research that was not ever endorsed by the federal government, because it was a prohibited substance, still is a prohibited substance under federal law, which is another issue, the conflict between federal law and state law. But it really is the whole plant, and then the oils derived from the plant. And so this is what is going to be happening and is booming right now. Most people still buy, when they go to the retail store, I'd say 60 to 65% of the sales are just the plant matter, marijuana in its vegetable form, it's not turned into anything else. But the plant is now being reduced to cannabis oil, and that still has all of the benefits of the whole plant. And then that oil is put into a wide variety of food products. We talk about cookies and brownies, but cookies and brownies are sugar and not particularly good for you. So you can actually put the oil into other foods and drinks and tinctures and so forth that have much more of a medical value. So there are some pharmaceutical benefits to taking the constituent elements, some of the active ingredients apart, and trying to aim them at certain medical conditions. But it really is the whole plant and the oils derived from the whole plant that are the most beneficial.
Now, let's talk about the investment side. Okay, so obviously the largest hurdle right now is this state and federal government miscommunication, or this is just not finished the way they want it to be. But can you talk about the next phase with regards to that? And can you explain on an investment opportunity, how much of the revenues are still on the illicit market, and once these profits come into the publicly traded companies and the private companies, how much more can this industry grow? I've heard numbers between, obviously double-digit growth, but I've heard some amazing numbers. The potential is quite high, because it's not only the medical, it's a recreational value of it, and like you said, it's all of these satellite businesses that will now cater to the marijuana from agriculture to marketing companies that will need to create advertisements for TV, radio, etc. So how early are we, and can you please talk a little bit about what's going on right now in Washington to make this finalized, because there's a lot of agitation among the investment community?
Yes, so we are really at the very beginning now. Washington and Colorado voted in 2012 to legalize. It didn't become effective until basically 1st of January of 2013. Then there was a one-year period to establish the regulatory structure and issue licenses and so forth. And so by 2014, these licenses were issued and continue to be. But then the businesses had to get up and running, and so we really didn't have production and sales on a wide scale in Washington and Colorado until about 2015, and it still continues to grow. So we really are at the very, very beginning of this worldwide market. Now, California, just in last November, voted to end prohibition in California and create a regulated market, but they still have a year to do the same thing, to develop the regulations, to have the state government provide the guidance for issuing licenses, and there's a lot of work that has to go into just getting a license and building the facility to grow or to process. A retail store is just a retail store, but that's the very end of the process. So we're still at the very beginning, lots of opportunity, but I do have to caution people that. And I can tell you, because my clients, in my law practice, I would say the majority of my clients have either failed or are really struggling. And it's not because of the federal prohibition or any, threat of prosecution or anything like that. This is business, and it's a business that requires business acumen. You have to know what you're doing. Stoners, people who may enjoy marijuana, and people who may even know how to grow marijuana, are not necessarily good business people. And so what I've found is that those who have succeeded have already been in business. They've been in the food business. They have experience in whatever. And so most of my successful clients are they're in their 50s and their 60s. They're headed to retirement, and they think, hey, this is an interesting opportunity. And they're going in and they're making quite a bit of money, actually dominating some corners of the market. I have other clients who are in their 20s and 30s, and they have wide eyes, and they're trying to build an empire. And then all of a sudden they find that they're not adequately capitalized, and everything just craters, and their businesses implode. They may start out big with a huge crop of marijuana, and they're able to grow and to sell. But then one thing or another happens, and there may be, in fact, a crop failure. This is an agricultural product, so you have to be, you're not making like identical plastic widgets or something. This is a high risk venture in many different ways. It's high risk because it is an agricultural product that can be subject to mold and to insects and to excessive rain or sun, or it's a hardy crop, and yet still there are a lot of risks there, and you do need to know what you're doing. So it's really, you need the mixture of business experience, knowledge about the plant itself, and then you have to make connections in the industry, because you have a separation between the production and the processing and the retail sectors, and so you have to know how to market and have to know how to brand and how to decorate your packaging and so forth. It's really quite complex. And then you have to make sure you have a good accountant, because if you don't have a good accountant, you pay too many taxes or not enough taxes and get in trouble with that. So it's a highly speculative venture, and yet the upside, the potential for profit is huge. And so, it's hard to say what to invest in, but we now have listings on New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ and over the counter, quite a number of penny stocks. But, it really is a roll of the dice unless you have some guidance as to what to invest in. I would recommend those companies that are focusing on medical uses right now, and to invest in. And these are some of the penny stocks, but it really is still a roll of the dice. You don't want to risk too much right now. We're just at the beginning, but you could be lucky. You could put $1,000 into a penny stock, and it'll skyrocket. And years from now, people will regret not having invested in this industry. So there'll be some winners and losers. But I would encourage looking very seriously into investing into this market.
Sure. Obviously, 2017 will be very different from 2016 because some of these companies, very select few of them, but like you said, they have very experienced managements, and they're starting to turn a profit for the first time. Roger Goodman, thank you very much for taking the time here. If people want to know a little bit about what you're doing for them with the legislative side, I understand that you're helping and consulting for legislators across the U.S., not just in Washington, and obviously you're a practicing lawyer. How can people reach out or just get updates on what you're doing?
I've got a number of different websites. I guess you could go to rogergoodman.org. So that's ROGERGOODMAN, rogergoodman.org, rogergoodman.org. That's my political website. That's my political campaign. So there's nothing really about cannabis there. The law firm that I practice with is called Gleam Law, GLEAM, like gleam in the eye, gleamlaw.com. And that is a cannabis-based law firm, full service. And so we help businesses from start to finish deal with their business challenges. And it's actually quite a happy law practice because although I did say some of the clients aren't doing well, most are succeeding.
This was our debut Cannabis Pioneers show, and we plan to cover this business boom throughout the next few years. While this tidal wave of profits moves away from the illicit market into the legal market, and we can participate in the gains. Today I spoke with one of the biggest proponents of legal marijuana, Representative Roger Goodman, and we went through a detailed analysis of the sector, and why it will be a lucrative business going forward. We discuss things like decreasing crime rates, which will free up police work, and we're incarcerating 800,000 users per year, which is a colossal waste of allocation of manpower and capital and taxes, etc. There's less alcoholism because people choose to drink less when they can consume a bit of weed. More education, more awareness, we can talk about this openly. Tax revenues are increasing, high-paying jobs are being created, less curiosity for the youth, so they're less engaged in the forbidden fruit, as Roger called it. Roger spoke about many advantages and also mentioned how the legislator has put restrictions on permits and on licenses, and so products will be better regulated and we as consumers will be protected. Pharmaceutical companies are now employing people to extract the oils in the best way. And overall, this federal to states issue is the only major hurdle sitting between this industry and a full throttle moment. Regarding investments, Roger warned that the difficulties is the lack of profits for many of these small cap stocks because they're just underway now. And Wealth Research Group has created a special report on exactly what to look for in the industry if you want to invest early. And right now, this is the pioneer level. The gains can be astronomical, as we've seen. Stay tuned next week as we will bring new guests in this industry, as well as on our Titans of Industry show, where we'll cover experts from the economy, Bitcoin, the resource sector, and retirement. Thanks for tuning in.